West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
All right, so America needs more teachers. There's no doubt about that. Schools are facing a shortage of 300,000 teachers and staff nationwide, according to the country's largest teachers union. Many districts are resorting to once unthinkable solutions to alleviate the pressure. Some rural districts in Texas have been forced to switch to 4-day weeks this fall. In Florida, they are asking veterans with no teaching background to enter classrooms. And in Arizona, they are allowing college students to step in and teach kids. Now, the shortage has hit crisis levels, and school officials everywhere are scrambling to ensure that as students return to classrooms, someone will be there to actually educate them. Joining me now is Dan Dominic. He is the executive director of the American Association of School Administrators. Dan, it's great to have you with us. Let's talk about some of the causes of this shortage. Some of it has to do with, I would argue, the escalating culture wars that is happening in our schools and in our society. You know, the banning of books, the limiting what teachers can teach, attacking teachers for what they say and cannot say in the classroom. What is your understanding of that being a contributing factor?
Well, pretty much all the things that you've just said, although it's important to note that the teacher shortage actually has been going on for a while. It began even before COVID. But what COVID has done is that it has accelerated the process, and it has increased the number of teachers that are leaving the profession, again, for the very things that you just mentioned. The tremendous stress of the job, the abuse that many teachers have been subjected to by parents and others in terms of what they teach or don't teach, the being in school in person as opposed to virtual learning. So all of these factors have contributed. The big problem here, though, beyond the current shortage, is the fact that the pipeline is dry. When you speak to colleges and universities that have schools of education, they will tell you that their enrollment is significantly lower than what it traditionally would be. So we don't have a crop of individuals that want to teach coming up. So as we losing the one that we do have, they are not going to be replaced. Not in the numbers that we need. So that is really the most urgent problem that we have right now. How are we going to get people into the classroom to teach?
I'm not sure if you saw last hour, my colleague Mehdi Hassan spoke with a parent from Keller, Texas, where the local school district has removed 42 books under their guidelines, including a graphic novel of the diary of Anne Frank. Here's what she said they're doing. Watch.
They are releasing a new set of guidelines tomorrow that is kind of their rubric of book banning. It's a rubric, it's a checklist for books, and it pretty much is going to kick a lot of books out of our library.
Your reaction to that and all the other cultural wars that are happening right now in our country to make life difficult for teachers?
Well, that's exactly the kind of action that's frustrating teachers. When parents are deciding what books can be read or not, when individuals are deciding what they can teach or not, when they can't talk about race or they can't talk about gender or they can't talk about systemic racism, or any of the issues that right now are outlawed by many boards of education or states like Texas and Florida. So this is definitely a contributing factor. And by the way, it's just not teachers that are leaving the profession. Principals are leaving as well, and superintendents as well. So we are having a major exodus of educators at a time when the children need these educators most. We're so excited about the fact that a new school year is about to begin, and the teachers are excited, the principals are excited, and yet a lot of these youngsters are going to be coming into situations where they may not have a certified teacher in front of that classroom.
So what do you think of some of these stopgap solutions that I listed, having states like, hiring veterans with no teaching experience, asking college students to teach kids? I mean, there's no substitute for a really good teacher. I know that firsthand from my own experiences and the impact they've had on my life. But what do you think of these stopgaps?
They are exactly stopgap, as you said. They're urgent solutions to the problem, but certainly not solving the problem. Anybody that thinks that teaching is an easy thing and anybody can do it should spend a full day in a classroom with 30 kids and then talk to us about how easy that job is. These individuals are trained. They're professionals. They go through 4 years of education, and then many states require an additional year or two to get a master's degree. They know what to do and how to do it. They know how to engage children. They know how to get the best out of children. Somebody that walks into a classroom because in Texas they served in the military and have 60 credits, or in Arizona anybody can go in, that's not going to work. It's going to put an adult in the classroom, yes, so it may fulfill the need to have that, but it certainly isn't going to provide children with the kind of quality educations that parents want for their kids.
Let me see if we can end this on a slightly positive note. What can and should be done to fix the crisis? How do you convince young people with the talent, the compassion, the care to become teachers in a society that is appreciating them less and less? Do you entice them with more money? Do you work on trying to change the atmosphere? What do you see as the solution?
Well, certainly more money will help, but that's not what people go into teaching. People that go into teaching recognize from the beginning that they're not going to get the pay that they could get if they went into the private sector. They do it because they love kids and they want to engage kids and they want to create it for themselves, that wonderful reward of doing things that will help children have a more successful life. What we need to do is to create better working environments. What we need to do is get the attitude of parents to change. You'll recall that at the beginning of the pandemic, heroes, along with healthcare workers and emergency personnel, teachers were heroes. Everybody loved the teachers because they were taking these kids in at the worst of circumstances. And all of a sudden that changed when we got into the wars over wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, being in person or virtual, vaccinations or no vaccinations, and now the culture wars of things like cultural race theory that nobody really knows what they're talking about when they say it. So that's what we need to do. We need to create an environment that teachers feel wanted, comfortable, and supported.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a father of two young kids in schools, I can't tell you how much I appreciate teachers and what they do. So they are more than just heroes. They're saints in a lot of communities. So Dan Domenech, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time and all the work that you guys are doing. Best to you.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
It is Monday, the 22nd of August of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because it's Monday, and here we are. Yes. Trump is still whining, lying his ass off, still apparently in possession of some secret documents. I think he still squirreled them away. Has the FBI searched Trump Tower? Have they searched Bedminster? I gotta tell you. And I would also get a court order to exhume Ivana's body, because there's something in that casket other than Ivana. He's hiding something. And for a number of reasons, and we know why. Paramount, well, let's put it this way. He does want to hide evidence that he's a treasonous, seditious insurgent, probably an actual paid asset of the FSB. We'll find that out soon enough. Or will we? But also, he is known to gather dirt on his opponents and his, quote, friends, end quote, to keep them in line. It's called blackmail. Other people would call it oppo research, but in Trump's case, it is blackmail. And we see the results of it. Look, you got somebody like Lindsey Graham, who basically called Trump an insane autocrat, and anybody who votes for him is, you know, an insane autocrat appeaser, sympathizer. And now Lindsey can't kiss that guy's feet enough. He can't kiss his butt enough. He's probably going to go pull a Mehmet Oz and kiss Trump's star on there in front of Grumman's. You know, of course, that they don't just put the Hollywood stars out there because, you know, it's something that's decided upon a panel, and they go, oh, yeah, we got to get that star's star on there. No, Trump got his star the way everybody else does. He paid for it. All right? He's the one that brought it up. He gave him the money, and they put the star there as if he's supposed to be some star. He never won it. I don't think he won an Emmy on that show, Apprentice. You never know. They hand those out like candy bars almost. Almost. So we have our work cut out for us. Lindsey apparently has a delay in testifying. He's using the speech and advise clause. Oh, advise and consent. Yeah, you're advising and consenting. I think that it's not part of your official business to overthrow an election, Lindsey. Give me a break. Oh, I was just calling them under my official duties as a senator, you know, the speech and advice clause. No. You're not going to get away with that. Anyway, I did read that the order, and a lot of people are going, oh, it means he doesn't have to testify for months. Well, it's temporary, yes. But it's also only a partial block, because he can still be asked questions outside of what his supposed speech and advise duties were. And those are, yes, we know, trying to get people to commit a crime with him while he's committing a crime, to overthrow a duly elected candidate, which would be Joe. All right, we'll see how this all shakes out. And, Merrick Garland, everybody's saying, oh, he's not going to indict. Well, he's getting all his ducks in a row because he knows how important this is. And, look, Donald Trump had the force of government behind him, whereas Timothy McVeigh did not. The Unabomber did not. The Olympics bomber did not. And let's remind ourselves about that Olympics bomber. He was a right-wing anti-abortionist who bombed abortion clinics, too. It wasn't just the Olympics bombing. He bombed the Atlanta Olympics because, you know, black people. And also to protest the fact that he's a right-wing loon, anti-abortionist, and women should not have any rights. Jeez. Especially black women. Wow. Okay. You know, a lot of these laws that go back to the Civil War time that are anti-abortion laws that were put into effect around that time, that a lot of these, and let's be clear, predominantly southern states want to reenact were put in place at the time because of the belief that the white race was not having enough babies. We're getting too many of these black people having babies. You know, we stopped the international slave trade because we would just get generational slaves. We'd make them into slave factories. They just produce the slaves. They come out of the womb. We, feed them and get them strong enough to go work in the fields until they drop dead. And, it's it's an endless loop. Hey, but now there's too many of them. There's more of them than there are of us. What happens if this becomes Haiti? They really feared that, too. As an aside, did you know that Haiti had to pay reparations to France up until just a few years ago because of the slave revolt? Because of the loss of income from France no longer having, slaves to do the work? I don't want to hear anything about people, they're just lazy, they don't work enough. From people whose ancestors were too lazy to do the work, so they hired slaves to do it hired. They incarcerated slaves to do it for them. Now, sometimes slaves are hired, if you want to look at the wage aspect of it, but we're talking about something a little different now, aren't we? They want to get back to that. They always talk about big business, corporate America. They always talk about a contract's a contract. We should be able to negotiate a contract with a worker so they work for nothing. I mean, it's a choice, isn't it? Democracy at work, my ass. They make democracy work so they can destroy it, or they work democracy so they can destroy it. Mondays. Yes, it's Monday. We're still, I may be in flux about whether my mom gets her surgery a week from today. She had her echo test late last week, and unfortunately, she fielded the call from the hospital that says that, to come in for your appointment, and I'm asking her, well, what day is that appointment? Because you're going to the coast with your daughter for the next 3 days, and you're not going to be back until late Wednesday. Do you remember what day they said you're supposed to be in? And she doesn't. So I will be calling the nurse that called. Get this. I love how they do this, too. They do it on a Saturday after 6. Okay. Well, it's a little bit hard to call you back then, isn't it? After business hours. So I'll be calling them right away and make sure that appointment, I believe, is on Thursday. But we're moving ahead, and I'm hoping that Mom's heart is well enough to be able to take this surgery, because otherwise it's going to be bad for her in terms of, look, I know it would be worse if she's not able to survive on the operating table. We don't want that either, We'll just roll with it. But I was under the impression, they called me and said it was all good. And now they're saying, well, it's prudent, isn't it? And I'm actually glad they're doing this because we want to make sure that Mom can handle the anesthesia. And the anesthesia needs to feel confident that they can do it. The surgeon's confident because they're specialists in doing this particular hip replacement surgery on the elderly, and that's good. But the anesthesiologist, they have the life of your loved one in their hands, or the gas mask. So we'll see how that goes. I'll find out tomorrow. Mom will be with my sister and a few of the other girls in the family out on the coast for a few days, and that's good. And so I still have my work cut out for me to get the house prepared and laundry done, sheets and whatnot all staged to be able to make a bed. It's almost like being back in the hotel business because I'll be making beds every day. Every day. And maybe Mom at some point will be well enough that she can make her own bed again, and that would be good because it's exercise and she likes to do that sort of thing, and she sort of is depressed that she can't even make her bed now. I don't blame her. Well, what do we have here in the curated part of the show as we begin this River City Hash Mondays? Yes, America's schools are facing a shortage of 300,000 teachers and staff nationwide, and that is a feature, not a bug. If they're going to push people to homeschooling and charter schools, what better way than to make public school careers just something you don't want to do? On the rest of the menu, the equity language in the Minneapolis teacher contract has ignited a firestorm among white conservative groups. Housing benefits for military families lag as rents explode. And after a 5-year review, U.S. protections for Idaho salmon and steelhead must stay in effect. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a planned strike at Britain's biggest shipping port has added to an already disrupted economic activity across the country, meaning there's other strikes going on right now. And African migratory birds are threatened by hot, dry weather that has depleted natural water systems and caused a devastating drought. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who has just returned from Pittsburgh, where Netroots Nation 22 was held, and we're looking forward to the interviews and other content that she acquired while attending the symposium, and we look forward to that. And we also look forward to next year's confab in Chicago, Netroots Nation 23 in Chicago. So let's plan to be there. That might be one that I want to go to. I actually, as an aside, sampled quite a bit of Oregon deep dish pizzas here for a bit of time, and I can confidently proclaim that after having quite a few samples of Oregon deep dish pizza, we are not in Chicago. Ugh. Boy, it's some sort of weird self-rising dough. If you're going to make a deep dish pizza, it has to be in a dish. Just saying. Anyway, thank you, Kelly, for everything that you do, and we look forward to Netroots Nation 22 interviews extra. If you would look across the page from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com to the left, you will then notice our Patreon link, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, you will really help us continue this powerhouse of resistance that Netroots Radio has been resisting for over 11 years. 11 of 24/7, 365 continuous resistance radio, because that's what we do. It is our civic duty. And your generosity has allowed us to continue in that civic duty, and we thank you for that. So if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, we are able then to put that into the kitty and pay our bills, fly under the radar, and continue this powerhouse of resistance that I mentioned, that the founders originally intended that we do so many years ago. All kidding aside, thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a lot more. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos 10 minutes before showtime, and you can find that diary and all the show notes and links by going to the links there on my Twitter feed at Justice Putnam, so follow me there. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 and the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library from the last 11 years can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay, our snoozing sous chef is doing his job, and that is snoozing. That's why we hired him. We didn't have to hire him, but we did anyway because he's such a great guy. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is by Steve Karnowski out of the Associated Press. When Minneapolis teachers settled a 14-day strike in March, they celebrated a groundbreaking provision in the new contract that was meant to shield teachers of color from seniority-based layoffs and help ensure that students from racial minorities have teachers who look like them. Months later, conservative media outlets have erupted with denunciations of the policy as racist and unconstitutional discrimination against white educators. Oh my. One legal group is looking to recruit teachers and taxpayers willing to sue to throw out the language. The teachers' union paints the dispute as a ginned-up controversy when there's no imminent danger of anyone losing their job. Meanwhile, the feud is unfolding just months ahead of arguments in a pair of U.S. Supreme Court cases that could reshape affirmative action, and we know what the maggot court wants to do with affirmative action right before the election. I don't know, it could be a two-edged sword for them, just like abortion has been. The same people who want to take down teachers' unions and blame seniority are now defending it for white people, said Greta Callahan, president of the teachers' unit at the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. This is all made up by the right wing now, and we could not be more proud of this language. Recent coverage in conservative platforms such as the local news website Alpha News, Fox News nationally, and the Daily Mail internationally sparked criticisms from prominent figures including Donald Trump Jr. and former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who curbed the power of public employee unions in his state. Walker on Twitter called it another example of why government unions should be eliminated. Yeah, bite me, Walker. The contract language does not specifically say that white teachers would be laid off ahead of teachers of color, though critics say that's what the effect would be. And who are those critics? The contract exempts teachers who are members of populations underrepresented among licensed teachers in the district, as well as alumni of historically black and Hispanic colleges and of tribal colleges. Around 60% of the district teachers are white, while more than 60% of the students are from racial minorities. Advocates say students from racial minorities perform better when their educators include teachers and support staff of color, and that is especially critical in a district that suffers from stubborn achievement gaps. Callahan said her union fought for years to get the protection added to their contract, and that she knows of 2 other Minnesota districts with similar provisions. Minneapolis is one of many districts across the U.S. struggling with declining teacher headcounts and tight budgets. But Callahan disputed that the provision threatens anyone's job, noting that Minneapolis has nearly 300 unfilled positions as teachers and students prepare to go back to school, and the language won't take effect until the 2023 academic year. Callahan called it just one teensy tiny step towards equity that doesn't begin to make up for many teachers of color quitting the district in recent years because they felt underpaid and disrespected. R.J. Rico of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. When Kristen Martin found out her husband was being transferred to Naval Base San Diego, securing housing for their family of 5 quickly took over her life. On-base housing was not an option. The wait list for a 4-bedroom home in the neighborhoods they qualified for was 14 to 16 months. Neither were the military-only hotels near base, where new arrivals can pay low rates as they get their bearings. Those were full, too. So Martin cast a wide net across San Diego and started applying for rental homes, all sight unseen. More than 30 rental applications later and hundreds of dollars in application fees down the drain, the Martins finally found a home. But there were caveats. They'd have to start paying rent a month before they actually moved in, and at $4,200 per month, their rent was nearly $700 more than the monthly basic allowance for housing known as BAH that her husband, a lieutenant, receives. We'll probably be here 2 or 3 years, so that could be $20,000 that we're paying out of pocket above the BAH just for rent, Martin said after completing her family's 4th move in 15 years last month. It's affecting us personally, but then I think about how we were a junior enlisted family at one point. I cannot imagine the struggles they are going through. Housing has long been a major benefit for service members, a subsidy to salaries that trail the private sector, but amid record-breaking spikes in rent, the Department of Defense has neglected its commitment to help military families find affordable places to live, service members and housing activists say. That's forced many of them to settle for substandard homes, deal with extremely long commutes, or pay thousands of dollars out of pocket that they had not budgeted for. Reports of the housing squeeze military families face has alarmed members of Congress who are pushing legislation that would force the Department of Defense to rethink how it handles housing. A common complaint is that with rents soaring nationwide, the housing allowances, which vary by rank and are recalculated annually, have not kept pace with rental markets, even though they're supposed to cover 95% of rental costs for the approximately 2/3 of active duty personnel who, like the Martins, have to live off base. According to a data analysis by the Associated Press of 5 of the most populous military bases in the U.S., housing allowances across all ranks have risen an average of 18.7% since January of 2018. In that span, according to real estate company Zillow, rents have skyrocketed almost 44% in those markets, which are Carlsbad, California, Colorado Springs, Colorado, El Paso, Texas, Killeen, Texas, and Tacoma, Washington. Riddler of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. A 5-year review by U.S. officials has determined that Endangered Species Act protections for ocean-going salmon and steelhead that reproduce in the Snake River and its Idaho tributaries must stay in effect. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Fisheries Division review, made public last Thursday, found that steelhead, spring and summer Chinook, sockeye, and fall Chinook that return to Idaho and rivers from the Pacific Ocean still need their federal protections. The protections include limits on fishing, restrictions on how much water can be used for irrigation, pollution controls for industries, and dam operations on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. The review said that threats from climate change increase the urgency of completing recommended fish recovery actions, including improving fish passage at hydropower dams, restoring their habitats, controlling predators, and changing hatchery practices. Of the 4 species that returned to Idaho, sockeye salmon are considered the most imperiled and were classified as endangered in 1991. The fish reproduces in high mountain lakes in central Idaho, and they teetered on extinction for much of the 1990s. An elaborate hatchery program operated by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game that tracks the genetic history of individual fish is aimed at restoring the species. But the population of sockeye salmon has not improved much since it was listed as endangered, the review said. The species remains at high risk of extinction amid challenges from climate change, a lack of food in oceans blamed on water warming, and because of sea lion predation. Historically, the fish spawned in Idaho areas that they could no longer reach, including above the Hells Canyon Dam and parts of the Clearwater River Basin, the federal review said. The researchers cited declining population trends and that no fish populations are reaching a minimum threshold set by the Interior Columbia Technical Recovery Team. The team works to interpret information related to fish recovery. Fall Chinook were classified as threatened in 1992 and include fish in the main stem Snake River below Hells Canyon Dam, the Salmon River, the Clearwater River Basins, and in the Tucumán, Grand Ronde, and Imnaha Rivers in Washington State. Steelhead, a favored sport fish classified as threatened in 1997, include fish in the Snake, Salmon, and Clearwater rivers and the Tucumán, Grand Ronde, and Imnaha rivers in Washington State. The review noted that there are no longer any steelhead that once spawned in tributaries above Hells Canyon Dam. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, you can say yes to Nope. Jordan Peele's latest movie, Nope, is an homage to old-school Hollywood, specifically Steven Spielberg, whose Close Encounters of the Third Kind was an obvious inspiration, as well as the tradition of cowboy movies. However, in classic Peele fashion, he turns both of these genres on their heads and creates a film that is characteristically original. The lonely cowboy here is named O.J., Yeah, really, played by Daniel Kaluuya, who, along with his sister Emerald, brought off by a jaw-droppingly good Keke Palmer, run a business that supplies studios with horses for movies and commercials. After the unexpected death of their father, OJ is depressed, going about his duties robotically, and talking about selling the business. All that changes, though, when an oddly shaped cloud starts hovering over the family ranch and strange things begin to happen. It soon becomes clear to all those involved, including a neighbor who has a nearby amusement park and who was once a child TV star who survived a brutal onset animal attack, that this cloud and what's hiding in it is not of this earth. Exactly what it is, or more specifically what it wants, is central to the statement Peele's attempting to make about spectacle and drama in the world and the entertainment industry's place in it. There's deeper stuff to be found here than most movies in the genre, which is pretty much what Peele seems to excel at these days. At the very least, Nope takes its place alongside Us and Get Out in that effort, and is a project that manages to make the most of the talents of the aforementioned Palmer, Kaluuya, as well as those of Brandon Perea, Michael Wincott, and Minori's Stephen Yoon. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. They say that lions are the king of the jungle. But a recent study shows that a single spritz of oxytocin, a hormone known to promote social bonding, renders even the most ornery alpha a total pussycat. The findings appear in the journal iScience.
Oh, the greatest thing about watching lions is that lions are so openly and extravagantly affectionate with each other.
Craig Packer, director of the Lion Center at the University of Minnesota. He's been traveling to the Serengeti since the 1970s to study the social behavior of these big cats.
They just rub each other with their foreheads. Their chins are just in each other's faces. I mean, they're just really into each other. And then when they calm down and it's time to go back to sleep, one will flop down and then will flop on top of it. So it's very endearing.
I've always loved lions.
Jessica Burkhart is a grad student in Packer's Pack.
But what is it about lions that is so different than their closest relative, the leopard, and then their next closest, the tiger, who are completely solitary?
And the first thing that came to mind was oxytocin.
They call oxytocin the love hormone, but that sounds like love potion number 9. I prefer to think of it as the affection hormone. If you have a nice warm hug, that burst of feeling you get, that's oxytocin. And so the lions would be like a perfect example of a species that you want to try to see what you could do with the oxytocin.
They conducted the study at a wildlife sanctuary in South Africa, where their first challenge was figuring out how to get the hormone into the lions.
Jessica surprised me with this perfume sprayer, which I just thought was so ingenious, and it worked out really, really well.
It's like a little glass bottle with a long tip, and then there's a bulb. So I have to pump the bulb, and then the tip is about 6 inches long.
Burkhart would lure a lion over to the enclosure fence by waving a tasty hunk of meat.
Once I hold that meat and the animal's grabbing it, I can kind of just stick it in the fence into their nostril and spray away.
The cats put up with the nasal invasion as long as they got their grub. But if Burkhart spritzed a lion after the meat was gone...
You should see their faces. They go, huh? Like, how dare you take a cheap shot on me? They take it personally. Oh, it's so funny.
The researchers then assessed oxytocin's effects in several different behavioral situations. The first was seeing whether the hormone would make a lion less territorial when it comes to a desirable toy or a snack. Normally, lions are pretty protective of their possessions, particularly those that can be eaten.
They'll growl and they'll snarl and they smack and they scratch and they snap. So a lot of times you will just get this sort of reactive behavior where they're going to just kind of lash out to be like, get off.
When it came to the toys, oxytocin did help to curb that reactive behavior, allowing other lions to come much closer. But it didn't do much for their monopolistic attitude toward meals, which Burkhart says was not entirely unexpected.
With the toy, you're playful, you might be more inclined to having your partners play with you. When you have a food object, it's a much more primal instinct. So with the food trial, it's that, innate desire to survive that causes this very reactive aggression.
Seeing that oxytocin suppressed aggression in one situation, but not the other, actually reassured the researchers that the hormone wasn't just making the lions totally dopey.
It doesn't, make your brain completely different, but it's like drinking your coffee in the morning.
If you're a testosterone-fueled grumpy Gus, it could render you almost delightfully demure.
Oh my gosh, within minutes of the oxytocin, that guy was completely chilled out. And I mean, when we were giving him his oxytocin, he was growling, smacking the fence, totally insane, testosterone brain, and then he just completely mellowed out.
But even more dramatic was the third test, in which the researchers played an audio recording of an unfamiliar lion's roar. Which can be as unnerving as it sounds.
That's like having a stranger in your bedroom saying, "I own this place," right?
Now, in the control conditions, in which lions got spritzed with a simple saline solution, about half of them roared in return, maybe 50 or 60 times.
That's about right. So half of the lions are going to actually roar, and the other half are going to be looking, probably standing behind the guy who's roaring and just looking and watching.
But when the lions were dosed with oxytocin,
there were zero. I mean, zero. They completely did not roar. That was astounding. You could just see this difference in demeanor. So they just laid there and they looked, they turned their heads, they were curious and they watched, but they're not getting up, puffing up, scent marking and roaring.
With the oxytocin, it's like, strangers, no big deal. And in some cases, it just seemed like, well, they were more interested in head rubbing with each other rather than worrying about the stranger.
The results give the team hope that oxytocin could provide a more effective way to introduce new lions into sanctuaries or reserves.
Because getting animals to become used to and accept strangers in their midst is an enormous challenge.
And that would be a big boost for conservation efforts.
And very key to using oxytocin to actually make a difference in the world.
A world with more tolerance and less roaring. Sounds darn near perfect. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
So lions will do these sequences where they're like, roar, roar, and then they do grunts.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
When is a raid not a raid? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. On August 8th, there was what many are calling a raid at former President Trump's residence, Mar-a-Lago. The first dictionary definition of a raid is a hostile or predatory incursion. The next definition, a surprise attack by a small force. There is an additional definition, a sudden invasion by officers of the law. The constitutional right at issue here is the protection afforded by the Fourth Amendment, which says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. What happened in Mar-a-Lago is that FBI agents conducted a search, pursuant to a search warrant, issued by a federal magistrate judge, who determined based on statements made under oath that there was probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed and that there was evidence of that crime or crimes at Mar-a-Lago. So, some media and various individuals will continue to call what the FBI did at Mar-a-Lago on August 8th a raid. But in the lexicon of the law and the Constitution, what happened at Mar-a-Lago was a search and seizure. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1945. That was the day 5 women working for United Airlines formed the first union for airline stewardesses. Those women were Ada Brown, Frances Hall, Edith Lauterbach, Sally Tometz, and Sally Watt. They called their new organization the Airline Stewardesses Association. The women elected Ada Brown as their first president. Stewardesses faced many workplace challenges. Ada Brown explained, "We had no rights. Let's put it that way. We were at the mercy of the company. Flight attendants were not permitted to marry. They had to meet strict height, weight, and appearance standards. Many times they had to put up with being referred to as girls while working long hours for low pay. They were expected to retire or take a job on the ground by the age of 32. The 5 women who organized the new union wanted to improve the conditions under which they worked. Within months, they had signed up 75% of their co-workers at United. The stewardesses at United had not received a pay increase for 15 years. The new union won a raise in starting wages from $125 to $155 a month. They also were able to establish a grievance procedure. Yet, it was not until the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 that the women had the ability to address some of the more sexist workplace requirements. Today, the union goes by the name Association of Flight Attendants. It represents nearly 60,000 workers at 18 airlines. Each year, the AFA gives the Ada Brown Greenfield Lifetime Achievement Award in recognition of women and men who have made a difference for their union.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting temperatures much cooler than what we had over the weekend, which was around 104 to 105. We are expecting a high of only around 91 to 93 today. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour as sunny conditions prevail throughout the day. Clear to partly cloudy overnight with lows in the upper 50s, low 60s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then partly cloudy skies tomorrow with highs nearly the same in the low 90s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon will be updated later in the week. We now stand at 495,093 confirmed cases, and our deceased stands at 570. Grass pollen is rated as low right here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 27 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is high at level 7. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.11 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 72%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources. from around the world. London is 72 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 80 and partly cloudy. Rome is 75 degrees with a light rain shower and thunder, which means they also have lightning. Kyiv is 82 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 65 with light rain. Hong Kong is 85 and fair. Tokyo is 79 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy. And New York, New York is 79 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. The first day of a planned strike at Britain's biggest container port started yesterday, Sunday, joining a series of walkouts by transportation workers that have disrupted economic activity across the country. Almost 2,000 workers at the port of Felixstowe, located about 93 miles northeast of London, walked off the jobs over pay, raising fears of severe supply chain problems. The port handles around 4 million containers a year from 2,000 ships, almost half of the country's incoming shipping freight. Britons are facing the worst cost of living crisis in decades as wages fail to keep pace with inflation and grocery costs and utility bill increases. The latest statistics put the inflation rate at 10.1%, a 40-year high.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Wanjohi Kabakuru of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Africa's migratory birds are threatened by changing weather patterns in the center and east of the continent that have depleted natural water systems and caused a devastating drought. Hotter and drier conditions due to climate change make it difficult for traveling species or losing their water sources and breeding grounds, with many now endangered or forced to alter their migration patterns entirely by settling in cooler northern areas. Roughly 10% of Africa's more than 2,000 bird species, including dozens of migratory birds, are threatened, with 28 species, such as the Madagascar fish eagle, the Tata falcon, and hooded vultures, classed as critically endangered. Over 1/3 of them are especially vulnerable to climate change and extreme weather, an analysis by environmental group BirdLife International said. The African-Eurasian Flyway, the flight corridor for birds that travel south through the Mediterranean Sea and Sahara Desert for the winter, harbors over 2,600 sites for migrating birds. An estimated 87% of African sites are at risk from climate change, a greater proportion than in Europe or Asia, a study by the UN Environment Agency and conservation group Wetlands International found. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.